let's shift a little bit into the more political space, because you mentioned feminism.
Yeah.
So I definitely want to talk about that in the bigger picture, where we're at with that. But I want to start with this tweet from Pearl Davis.
Okay.
It's got 12.1 million views, 1,734 reposts, 34,000 likes, has been quoted 3,638 times, and it is a picture of her wearing a shirt saying women shouldn't vote. Should women vote?
I think their vote should carry half as much weight as men's. If I'm going to be honest,
you're in the middle.
I'm in the middle. I think women should have the ability to vote, and it depending on what position they hold. If they're in the military and they're some type of government service, then I think absolutely their vote should count all the way. But if it's just a female and she doesn't have any type of civil service or anything else like that, then I think it should be. And this goes for the men too.
Right.
Certain guys shouldn't vote either. If you're working at McDonald's, etc., should your vote count all the way?
Well,
no.
So then it's not a question of, in your mind, women. It's a question of, should people not engaged in civic duty vote?
Yes, but to be honest with it, let's keep it 1,000. That's going to immediately put a majority of women as only half voters,
right?
Because that's the career fields that's the career fields and life decisions that women make in general.
Well, so do you want to respond to this?
I feel like I'm taking crazy pills here, but I think part of the problem is that the view, I guess our views of women are so much different, because when I think of a woman, I think of a woman who runs a household and raises children and does the most beautiful thing that you can possibly do. So I see so much inherent value, and I think,
which we agree is important.
Okay, but I kind of feel like what we're doing here is we've trained as men, women, we've incentivized certain behavior, and now we want to discount them because they're giving the men what they're asking for, which is OnlyFans, Instagram, ass shots. And then we're saying now suddenly that they're somehow less valuable.
Takes two to tango. Well, right. A lot of the stuff that we're seeing women do, it's like they're
filling demand is all they're doing.
Well, we allowed them to do this, so you are correct in that sense, because as men we're leaders. But I will say this: if we're talking about votes here, women are more easily swayed to one direction or another, because once again they follow leadership to depending on who they see as important. So ultimately speaking, if I'm gonna go for votes, I swear to women, I'm going to win.
So you're saying, but what you're saying is that we as men are ineffective leaders, and therefore, because we cannot lead properly, that now the women should have a half a vote or no vote or what? Like, to me, I'm always like looking first internally. What did I do? How did I fail here? Or what was the point of failure that happened here in leadership? And everything I'm hearing is like men have failed in many.
Well, yeah, by letting women vote. So that's how they failed. I mean, let's keep it 1,000.
So first, I'll address what you said. I believe the science is clear that women are more agreeable, men are more disagreeable.
Correct.
Yeah. So it's harder to convince a guy. He'll challenge you. He'll headbutt you. A woman is going to try and make things smooth over. Yeah. There's a lot of positives to being agreeable and a lot of negatives to being disagreeable, and vice versa. It's pros and cons. Men and women are different and complementary.
Yes. Now, there's an agenda, though. Of course, we can go deeper here, get more serious. But to be real here, men were at the helm of this because, once again, we put certain policies in place, we allow things to happen, and as a result, the family is destroyed. Now, when it comes to women, obviously, they're human beings as well. Equally, we're all human beings. But to be fair, when it comes to voting and political views, they can be swayed in any direction, which means, by default, they should vote.
But so
look, man, let's keep it a million. Women are communitarian in general. They tend to vote Democrat. They tend to vote for, hey, let's give everybody $1 versus giving the best person $1. They don't base their values a lot of times are not aligned with meritocracy. They want everyone to benefit, which is cool, I guess, if you like communism. But if you're a capitalistic guy, you want the best to succeed. And unfortunately, a lot of the times, women don't believe in meritocracy. They believe in communitarian in general, not all, but most.
We'll go back to some of the common points brought up from suffrage.
Yeah.
So this is typically, I feel like it's typically not talked about that there were a lot of women who opposed women's suffrage because initially it was tied to civic duty.
Yes.
Men who were voting had to be on the fire brigade. You had to, you could be drafted. You could go and die. And so with that, the idea is like, if we can force you to go fight and die, you get a say in a vote as to who decides.
Absolutely.
Women can't be forced to go off and fight and die, so they should not have a say in these matters.
That's a big part of the reason why I say they should get 50% is because women don't have to join the selective service. I can't tell you how many times we've done the podcast.
That's an argument for not voting at all.
Yeah. Do you even know? That's what I'm saying. That's why a lot of them should be limited. I ask women all the time, do you even know what the selective service is? Most of them don't even know it.
So what ends up happening is, and I have only a cursory knowledge of this, correct me if I'm wrong for those that are listening, feel free. I don't think I'm completely right on this. What I read was that a compromise was made women were not going to get suffrage because they were like, we don't want to go to war and we don't want a fire brigade. We want the men to do those things. Please leave us alone.
Yep.
And so that caused a point of contention where it wasn't going to move forward until finally the men who were running the show in Congress and stuff and relented and said, okay, women can vote and no civic duty. And everyone said, okay, we agree to that.
Yeah.
That doesn't make any sense to me. So where we're at now is we're in a completely different world. I do think women should be allowed to vote. However, I don't think anyone should be allowed to vote without civic duty. It makes no sense to me that someone can move into New York City without having any ties to the community, vote to destroy the place, and then leave. That's a problem. People, typically Democrats talk about how evil it was that only landowners were allowed to vote back then, but they're ignoring the context of history in that there were no ID cards. Voting was, do you live here or no? You don't live here? Okay, well, dude, you're not voting on how we're going to defend, facilitate, expand. That actually makes a ton of sense.
It does.
If you don't live in my house, you can't vote on whether or not we're going to install a hot tub or, a cold plunge. Mm. If we're roommates, we get to vote on what's for dinner. If you're my neighbor, why are you voting? Like, why did you invite your friend over to vote on what I get to have for dinner? And now he's leaving tomorrow and you're making me eat garbage food.
Well, this is why it's so important to have authority tied with responsibility. The problem is that we're giving people authority with zero responsibility, which goes back to the female voting situation, right? A lot of these women that vote, a lot of times, they don't necessarily know how the government works, how the economy works, etc. And they're over here making very serious decisions and putting people like Sleepy Joe in office who don't necessarily deserve to be there.
And when you look at the maps, the voting maps, it's a fact. Women, if they do the map, if only women voted, whole country except for like one state is blue. If only men voted, whole country is red except for like one state. I am not saying that means women should not have their vote. I'm saying nobody should just be granted the right to vote in any capacity without some responsibility tied to it.
There's got to be checks and balances. I agree.
So,
you got to have some responsibility.
IQ test. You pass it, you can vote.
No, well, because that's subjective. You're asking someone else. Like the problem, but people have talked about things like this, tests of merit. Vivek Ramaswamy has said a constitution or civics test. Mm-hmm. If you're under the age of 25 and you want to vote, you got to pass a test. I'm like, that's nonsense because there's 26-year-olds who are dumb as a box of rocks.
Yeah.
There's 50-year-olds. There's men who are voting. Look, there are a large portion of conservative Republican-leaning women removing their vote. Why? They're 50-50 men. Men are voting Democrat too. I don't see a political argument for or against voting. I see a civic argument, genderless, right? I talked to Vivek Ramaswamy about this, and I thought one of a really good, simple idea that we brushed upon was the moment you sign up for the Selective Service, you're also granted a voter registration ID card. Mm-hmm. Registering to vote is the Selective Service. Here's what happens. This solves the problem for everybody. You don't have to go to war. You're not being drafted. The likelihood of that is extremely low. You're simply saying, I am willing to be in the event anything does happen. I know there are problems with that because I think the draft is really, really bad because you look at how the United States government has changed. It's one thing to say, hey, we're being invaded to arms men. It's another thing to be like, we're sending you to Vietnam, in the Gulf of Tonkin incident, all that I'll avoid. But, nonsense, false flags, fake reasons for getting into war. But think about what happens. If you say, everyone's allowed to vote, but you got to sign up for Selective Service, men and women both. You are going to have 95% of low value individuals, men and women, being like, nah, I'm cool. I don't want to be involved in that at all.
That's a good way to go about it. I mean, I think
it's not perfect. I'm just saying it was an idea we brushed up.
No, that's a good solution. I mean, because my thing is, if you're going to have authority, you need to have responsibility too. And we've done a fantastic job in the modern day age of giving women a bunch of authority without necessarily giving them responsibility. And that's my issue.
Well, you haven't chimed in so far.
Well, I'm trying to wrap my head around the idea of what it would look like for women not to vote. Obviously, I think women should be able to vote, but
I'm not arguing that either.
I know.
Right?
I just don't. It's a hard because like there is some merit to some of the things that are being said, but like I don't think there is a solution. I mean I would consider myself more high value, and I personally would not want to sign up for this current government to then draft me.
You're already signed up for Selective Service.
Just as being a man,
18 years old, you have to.
Yeah.
So it would just be adding women then.
So it's not even about women. It's about the moment you sign up for Selective Service, you are registering to vote and receiving a voter ID card. That's it. Man or woman, doesn't matter. If you're a dude and you say, I'm not signing up for that, well, then you can't vote.
What about immigrants?
If you're a citizen.
Okay.
Not like nonsense. So my view for immigrants is if you sign up for U.S. service, you should be given expedited access to becoming a citizen.
Agreed.
Like you're willing to fight for us.
Agreed.
Follow our rules. You have someone in command telling what to do. And so a lot of people say like, I don't want to get drafted. I signed up for that. Listen, the only people voting are going to be the people who could be drafted. Right now, you've got people who can't be drafted voting on behalf of us who can.
Yeah.
That's nonsense.
I agree.